Hi, my name is Eric, and I review theater, theme parks, and immersive events in Southern California, and today I want to talk to you about the Geffen Playhouse production of Dragon Mama, running now in their Audrey Skirball Kennis Theater through April 12th. Dragon Mama is a sequel to Dragon Lady and is part 2 of a trilogy of shows called the Dragon Cycle, what Sarah Porkalob, its writer and performer, dubs a matrilineal musical trilogy. Each show in the Dragon Cycle trilogy focuses on a different member of her family. The first part being about her grandmother, that's Dragon Lady, which was at the Geffen Playhouse in 2024. This second part being Dragon Mama, a show about her mother, Maria Porkalob. And the third part, Dragon Baby, which has not yet been produced, is going to be about Sarah Porkalob herself. So who is Sarah Porkalob? She is an actor based in Seattle, who has been performing the Dragon Cycle shows since the first one, Dragon Lady, premiered in 2017 in Seattle. This show, Dragon Mama, premiered in 2019 at the ART in Massachusetts, and it wasn't until 2024 that the show had its Southern California premiere when the Geffen Playhouse produced Part 1, Dragon Lady, in their Gil Cates Theater, and we are now following it up with Dragon Mama in their smaller Audrey Skirball Kennis Black Box Theater. I should also note before I get any further, I saw this show last week on March 5th, which was technically its second preview, meaning that the show is not officially open. Opening night is tomorrow, March 12th. And therefore, I hesitate to call this a full-on review of Dragon Mama, because in the week between when I saw the show and when it opens tomorrow night, there may have been changes, especially when it comes to some of the more technical elements like the lighting or the sound, which I am going to speak on and compliment. However, I cannot promise that the show that I saw last week is going to be the one that you're going to see if you decide to see the show after it opens tomorrow night. All that aside, what is Dragon Mama about? Well, Sarah Porkalob is a Filipino American, and she uses these shows to give an oral history of the story of how her family came to America from the Philippines and assimilated into American culture. Dragon Lady, being about her grandmother, was about her grandmother's travels from the Philippines to America. This sequel, Dragon Mama, is about her mother, as she is a first-generation American learning to adapt to American society and also still hold on to her roots, while also dealing with her single mother, who is not at times the most attentive or most careful parent of her and her 5 other siblings. In Dragon Mama, just like Dragon Lady, Sarah Porkalob plays every single role in this show. A mighty task, but one that she is absolutely equipped to do. This is some of the most impressive solo show character work I've ever seen. Dragon Mama, I believe, has around 30 characters that she plays that she is swapping between seamlessly, whether it be her mother, her grandmother, any of her different siblings, which she all gives a specific and fantastic affect and detail to, so you can tell them apart even when she's switching between multiple at the same time. She also performs as some of her mother's friends when she was a child. She also performs as one of her mother's lovers, who we meet later in the second act. And it is this incredible theatrical feat that Sarah Porkalob, who is taking this deeply personal story, infusing it with her own creative spirit while also staying true to the family roots and the real people in her family who she is actually bringing to life in this performance. The show starts from the point of view of her mother, Maria Porkalob, who she plays for the length of the show. And we begin in Bremerton, Washington, where Sarah and her mother and her siblings have moved after emigrating from the Philippines, then to Hawaii, and now to Bremerton, Washington. And we meet Maria Porkalob on the precipice of being a teenager. She's going to slumber parties, she's getting into trouble, she's stealing Walkmans, she's having to sort of co-parent alongside her mother since she is the eldest in her family. And there are clues that we get as the show goes on that Maria is being asked to take on a lot more than anyone her age should have to, given that her mother is a single mother and is often not around, whether it be from working jobs or from going off and sort of leaving without notice for sometimes what is weeks at a time. As we follow Maria through her teenage years, we see her making friends, we see her going to parties, we see her sort of blossoming into the person that she wants to become as it pushes against the person that she feels that she's being forced to become as the eldest sister in this family. What sort of comes into the picture as the first act goes on is that Maria Porkalob is queer. She finds that she has feelings for her girlfriends and is not always able to have those feelings reciprocated, especially in Washington in the 80s and a very conservative part of the state. She is not sure how to reckon those feelings with her friends. And it isn't until the second act of the show where Maria, who is now a young adult and a mother of a small daughter named Sarah, that Maria leaves Washington to work on a fishing boat in Alaska so that she can save up money and eventually bring her young child to come and live with her in a different state. And it is there that Maria is able to sort of blossom into the queer person that she wasn't able to be because of the familial pressure that she felt as a young adult living still in Washington. So the show is a very, I guess you could say a classic coming of age story. It is a queer coming of age story that is quite zany. It is very silly. I laughed so much at this show just because of the pure madcap, dynamic, wacko performances that Sarah Porkalob is giving as she is switching between characters faster than I can even keep track of. But thankfully, I never felt like I was being left behind or that the show was moving too fast for me to hold on to what was going on. I think that credit goes to Sarah for being such an adept performer. She is so good at throwing her voice into different characters immediately because she has such a strong grasp on these people, most of whom are real people that she knows in her life. She's playing her mother, her grandmother, her uncles, her aunts. She is able to sort of bring a very specific truth to all of the physical and vocal lives of these people. Even the people who I'm not necessarily sure Sarah has ever met, like her mother's childhood friends or one of her mother's bosses when she works on a fishing boat in Alaska. She still is able to breathe such a full and rounded life to every person that we meet. And it's really impressive that she's able to handle all of that on a set that is fairly bare bones, at least compared to the set that we had in Dragon Lady. Dragon Mama has a set designed by Randy Wong Westbrook. It is a sort of big, flat, square panel with wooden slats, and then along the back wall of the theater, we have these more large wooden slats with a zigzag neon line going across the back that spells out the words Mama. Definitely a toned down visual style, one that sort of tells us that this story is going to be a more muted one, perhaps, than what we got in Dragon Lady, which was more of a bombastic, explosive, large cabaret musical style excursion. Credit also has to go to Aaron Bednarz for the sound design. Again, because we are working with so little things on this set, there is so much work done to amplify Sarah's voices in unique and specific ways. I remember specifically there's a karaoke scene that happens at a bar in the second half of the show where even though Sarah is just miming holding a microphone in her hand, the words that she is singing are amplified as if it's coming out of a karaoke machine speaker. And there are so many silly moments where there are things done with sound that threw me off guard, especially in that karaoke scene. And I think that Andrew Russell, who is the director of both Part 1 and Part 2 here, is able to handle the seriousness of some of the darker moments of this show and balance them really well and guide Sarah through these emotional beats without us ever feeling like we are getting lost in the character swaps or in the tonal whiplash that happens when things will go from very, very dark and serious to incredibly silly and incredibly funny. And it's because of his direction that I think Sarah is able to be comfortable in this very personal story. You know, it's a lot to bring such a personal story to life on stage and have it still feel so wide. And I think that because the show sort of creates this wide lens that so many people, immigrant or not, can bring their own personal experience to, justifies this show being produced on this scale. There is sometimes a fear that one-man shows can come off as indulgent vanity projects, and I do not think that that is true at all here. Like, yes, oh my god, of course, Sarah Porkalob is just absolutely a stick of dynamite on stage and is just so incredibly impressive, but it's not just us watching going, wow, this lady's really impressive at playing all these characters and singing and moving and sharing this story. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about the oral tradition of immigrant storytelling. You know, so few immigrant stories are written down or kept in a physical place, and so all people have oftentimes when they're immigrating is the oral tradition that is passed down from generation to generation. So for Sarah to be presenting this show of her own story that is both her story and her mother's story and her grandmother's story. It's a beautiful way to allow art to be an encoder of memory and become this sort of piece that it can sort of live on just beyond the person who was telling the story, but then also be passed on to everyone who was receiving the story in the audience. I remember seeing on the Geffen website, Sarah did this promo video talking about the show where she was addressing the reason why Dragon Mama is happening in a smaller theater. She said that it's a very deliberate choice, as sad as people might be that the seating is not as large. Therefore, tickets may not be as easy to get because of the smaller space and the less available seating. And she was talking about how she wants audience members sitting so close in Dragon Mama that they can see the whites of her eyes and that they can see every expression and every change. And that kind of illuminated to me what I think is actually really genius about both of these shows that I've seen so far. Because if you imagine the closeness and the proximity that's happening in Dragon Mama, it almost plays like it's a film. The way that there are smash cuts with the lighting, or the way that there are close-ups when she gets very specific with the facial expression or the body movement that she wants your eyes to be drawn to. There's this use of this 80s Cyndi Lauper, Whitney Houston pop soundtrack that really makes this story, Dragon Mama, feel like it's a coming-of-age 80s, like John Hughes movie or something. And I think that's so brilliant to use the medium of theater and to shift the way that you're telling the story to specifically match that story. Think about how Dragon Lady Part 1 is this big, massive, huge cabaret-style show with these live musicians and all of this. And it's really keying into the ways in which these women in Sarah's family view how they tell their stories. Dragon Lady, the grandma, is obviously going to see her life as this fantastic cabaret show when she remembers the story and when she's telling it to Sarah. And then on the other side of that, you have Maria Porkalob, who grew up in the 80s and sees her life as an 80s coming-of-age queer drama film. And I think that's so brilliant that the story necessitates the style of the medium in which it's being told. And I think you have to give credit to director Andrew Russell for the skill in specifying the different ways in which these two shows have so far been told to us. Because Dragon Mama, as an 80s rom-com, plays like it's an 80s rom-com. It has the comedy, it has the over-the-top characters, it has the 80s cheese and the pastiche that you would find in those films. And so it brings to my mind the question of, when we eventually get Dragon Baby, what is the medium through which we will learn that Sarah sees her own personal story? What are we in for there? All that to say, I absolutely adored this show. I think it is one of the more impressive shows I've seen at the Geffen in the last couple years, and I really, really hope that they produce Dragon Baby Part 3 in a couple years. That one's going to be a full musical with a full cast, which is very interesting to me. The first two shows have only been a one-person show, but Part 3 apparently is going to be a much bigger, fuller thing. So, despite seeing a preview, I fully suggest that you go see Dragon Mama at the Geffen Playhouse. Like I said, it is playing now through April 12th. Hopefully it gets extended. One of the downsides of this show is that because it is a sequel to a show that was in a really big theater, now happening in a much smaller theater, just by virtue of seats that are available, not everyone who saw Dragon Lady will get to see Dragon Mama. That's a darn shame. I hope that they extend the show. I hope that Sarah continues to tell stories and is allowed to tell stories the way that she wants to, because she is just one of those energies that as soon as they start on stage, you just feel fully safe in her hand, like a little bird being held by a mama bird. Mama, or a dragon, or a baby dragon in your hand. Anyway, if you saw Dragon Mama at Geffen Playhouse, let me know in the comments. Subscribe. Tell me what other shows are coming up that you'd like me to see. I'm taking a trip down to San Diego tonight to see a few more shows. And hopefully I'll get to do a few more extra cool, exciting things coming up as we leave LA winter and move into LA spring, which is pretty much the same thing as LA winter because it's always the same here. Anyway, like and subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye.